Hi, hello. First of all, thanks a lot for the invitation. We are very glad that we can be here today with you. We are to talk about digitalization of the processes, but basically as a business as usual. Doesn't seem so exciting, but actually when we go into details, it apparently, from our perspective, happens that we face a lot of pitfalls, a lot of problems when digitalizing ordinary, regular actions during business as usual. That's why we pose this topic, that we are still pioneers, because we face questions like this in our advisory services. So still, until we don't know how to approach although there was a lot talk about during the pandemic, which is still happening. Let's skip all this part. Let's skip the topic of COVID, pandemic, remote working, furiously fast digitalization. This has been said so many times. We feel like we are profs in these topics. Still, we ask questions like, what happens if my certificate expires? Where is the original? Can I use electronic stamp to sign contract? Going forward, in what we understand and in business as usual, we can put it into process.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, as you may have noticed, we are consultants, and as consultants, we like to put the things in the boxes. So what you can see here, this is one of the processes we have defined. A very simplified view of a very, very large process, but it will help us organize the things that we want to say and the journey we want to take you on of electronic signatures. So first step in this process is onboarding. So first of all, let's hear the view of the legal department regarding the onboarding.
Okay, so just to give you like a brief view how onboarding looks, we usually identify onboarding with identification, the very much topic that we've talked as lately, and there will be a lot of it during whole day today. Of course, it also includes other things like chain of authorization. But from legal perspective, I would like to ask two questions which are very practically important if we are to make success of the digitalization of the process. We try to make of this process picture of Mr. Smith certificate that is about to buy some kind of goods. Let's say that it's a IT computer, or that kind of thing. Why do we need identification? Obviously, if we want to have a transaction, legal transaction, we need to know who is to be parties to such a transaction. Mr. Smith can be either the person that is signing contracts or going into contract as himself, or representing a company and buying the IT equipment for the whole company. Then there will be a question if he is authorized to do so. Still, there can be, of course, such simple situation as his 10-year-old daughter going into his computer. We know all those cases with very smart kids these days, buying things on his account, on his computer, which basically from legal point of view wouldn't be valid, as this is 10-year-old child. And this is the question of why do we identify? The other important question is how do we identify the other party to a relationship, legal relationship. And the the most important answer would be, of course, if we go to a general total digitalization, this should be online remotely. But another things from my legal point of view that would be very important to address is how much data do we need to gather in order to identify? What is sufficient to say that we have reliable, safe identification? What's more, if we are to identify ourselves, we also don't want to spread all our personalities all around in case we go into any typical transaction every day. So this is really worth stressing that if we can, we would rather gather or give as little personalities as possible. And that is why, from the legal perspective, the universal European identity will be so important, because in this case, the personality, the credential, the data would be gathered by the trusted other entity to serve then and make a reliable identification in particular transactions.
Okay, so just to give you a brief example of how it works with technology, because as you know, remote onboarding is pretty much a standard service right now in the financial sector. And what I'm about to say is not to stigmatize anyone or laugh at anyone, just to point to you how underneath the hood those kind of services are realized. So a few weeks back, I was trying to onboard to one of the banks. I took the photos of my entire face with my cell phone, just make some strange faces just for the algorithms to work. And then the application was stuck. It was sometime in the evening. Later on in the morning, the bank calls me and asks me why I didn't finish the onboarding process. So I said that, well, it's stuck, basically. So probably your algorithm is down. And what I heard is that basically there's no algorithm. There's just a bunch of people that are analyzing those pictures and confirming the identity, and they finish their work at 3 or 5 p.m. So basically using this application. So as you can see, in some cases, we still struggle on the technological layer underneath to realize that those services, even those services that are deemed standard right now in the industry. So over to the signing.
Yes, if we are already done with the identification, we've got the personalities and we've got the parties, we can go into signing, into contract of a relation. And then maybe it is surprising, although I try to repeat it so many times, maybe too many, maybe not, that once again, from legal point of view, there is surprisingly a lot of contracts that would be sufficiently legally, validly signed, executed electronically. So let's not panic. Written form is also sufficiently can be replaced by so simply as qualified electronic signature. This is what we have, why it matters at the point of signing to define what kind of transaction do we have. And of course, if we are buying computer for ourselves, if it's going to be a contract of leasing, we know all in Poland, it's a written form, not only in Poland, that's a problem. Then we try to manage how to avoid the wet ink signature and go into qualified electronic signature. The real problems begins when we have a need to use other very special forms like notarization. Even broader, that's actually a problem happening in many countries. That's not only about Poland. When we need some kind of witnessing. Let's not go into the details of whether witnessing needs to really actually happen in real life, like meeting you here in person, but perhaps it's not that much necessary, especially nowadays. There are also that type of pitfalls like certification. For instance, well known to everyone, apostille, which basically what is apostille? Apostille is a sticker. It's a paper form sticker. It's the point where not much can be done in matters of going into digitalization.
Okay, now we are into execution. With execution, I would like to change the environment we are we've been so far. So far, when we talked about electronic signatures, we mainly had contracts in mind. But there is a lot more documents that are in the company that can also be electronically signed if we are talking about digitizing the company altogether. So from also contractual documents like client approvals or timesheets that you sometimes need to provide to a client when you're executing a project, to technical testing documentation that needs to be signed off. Some of this documentation needs to be signed by an individual. Some can be stamped by an organization. And in every, especially bigger organization, there's a lot of places that those kind of documents are stored. So basically here we are not talking about the electronic signature as such anymore. We are talking about the whole document management and data governance. That basically in larger companies there is still a lot to be done in this area. In one of the companies I was working for lately, we found over 100 systems that were storing different documents, and that of course didn't include all the file shares, OneDrives, emails, external drives or floppy disks that usually contain this kind of documents. And nobody had any inventory of those documents. It took a month just to figure out what kind of documents 12 of those systems are storing. And in case we are talking about electronic signatures, if we, let's say that on average a certificate is valid for 1 year. So at the time of signing, on average, we have half a year or 6 months left of the validity of this signature. So we have to somehow maintain those signatures. And this is where we first of all need to find out where those documents are stored. Because if we hold them on emails, no matter what kind of strategy for maintaining those signatures we take on, we cannot execute it because we simply do not know where the documents are. And that also applies to archiving. So for archiving, basically, we can take 3 strategies right now, given the current technological circumstances. We can either sign the document while we extract it from the archive. We can validate the signature when we take it into the archive. We can also maintain the signatures in the archive itself. And the third option, this is the first 2 are quite easy. The third one is when it gets complicated, because potentially if you have to hold your documents for 5 years, and in the case of medical documentation for 25 years, then you have hundreds of thousands of documents that you need to sign. And you have to remember that in most cases, archiving is optimized for storage costs. So if we take Google Cloud Platform, for instance, usually people are holding their archives in the archiving tier, which is very cheap to store, but very expensive to retrieve. And if every year you have to retrieve every document from the archive, well, that's the significant cost that you have to consider.
So just to summarize this also legally, if there is one thing to give, be smart. Most of the documents usually are not needed, or you don't need to print them out like as from online registers. Second of all, don't put things in the agreements that are also not needed, especially regarding form appendix in originals. Just be smart, think it through, and then keep focused. Where do you store those documents? Whether you need to copy them. Of remembering in terms of the original If we execute documents in electronic form, the electronic form is original, so each copy will be original also.
Yes, and from a technical perspective, just remember, electronic signature is not the end of the road. This is just the beginning. So keep in mind that you need to maintain it and then you need to govern it. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.